Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider Series, where I interview top practitioners in the CVC world and learn with you the best practices and golden nuggets that they have accumulated over their career. In this episode, we will be learning from Paolo Bavaj, head of Henkel Tech Ventures. Paolo, could you take a few minutes to share your story and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for the invitation and thank you very much for the opportunity of the discussion. I'm a PhD chemist and I started really in the chemical industry. So after my PhD, I thought I have enough from these small little glass flasks. So I wanted to go into larger scale. So I started in the manufacturing in the typical chemical industry environment. I started with Höchst, which then became Cyanese Chemicals. I was there for 15 years and new business development was also there, really my interest and where my energy was. And then 11 and a half years ago, I joined Henkel Adhesive Technologies, so the material science business of Henkel, and led the corporate strategy and business development team. And we looked into two facets. One facet was the operating business. So we did develop portfolio management for the operating business, making sure that the investments of the company are going where the return is maximized. And on the other hand, we were looking at innovation. So we had actually, I think, about 3,000 innovation programs in place with roughly 1,600 R&D people. And the largest project in innovation was less than 10 million euros. So the adhesive technologies business of Henkel was at that point in time 8 billion euros. So a 10 million euro business had not enough impact from an innovation perspective to that business. We basically thought about different approaches and we had a kind of two-tier approach. So one point was we should not forget about these small projects. We still need them, maybe not as many as 3,000, but we still need the small projects in order to constantly renovate our product portfolio and to secure organic growth. I mean, answering basically on immediate and significant customer needs to respond there with little product tweaks here and there. But if you really would like to develop larger new businesses, then you need a totally different approach and you need different people. I presented an approach about new business development and then the company told me, yeah, sounds interesting. You can pick 3 people and we will revisit the activity after a year. So I did pick 3 people. We developed some nice opportunities. We developed, for example, a particular technology for plastic welding of 2 very different plastic materials, which is still an issue in the automotive industry, for example. We did develop these opportunities and everybody was super happy with what we did. And that was then moved into new business development. And since the general approach in R&D in Henkel is very much tech push driven, we said that for new business development, we really need to do market pull. Of course, when you do market pull, the inherent disadvantage is that you cannot necessarily develop the technologies yourselves, which you need for the market opportunity. So you need to look for those technologies outside of Henkel. And at some point in time, it was really tight. We were almost not finding the right technology, but then we found a startup company in California with that technology which we were looking for. It was actually a kind of high barrier layer for OLED materials. And so that was our first investment. Then in March 2014, we did another investment in Boston into a startup which was a carve out from the MIT in summer 2015. And then everybody got excited about startups. And because up to that point, only very few people in Henkel had an idea about the startups. They were thinking that startups, these are the young guys sitting somewhere with their computers in the basements, drinking Coca-Cola and eating chips.
Like in the movies.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was actually great to show them that startups are really very serious and top-notch lists who can develop stuff which we cannot develop. And not because we have stupid people, because we are in a different environment. We have different technical setup and different skill sets and capabilities from a technical point of view. We got interested more in these startups. We wanted to make a more systematic approach to it. And that was the point when we invested into VC funds to generate a deal flow and to have also people to discuss certain investment opportunities with. And that was basically the starting point of Henkel Tech Ventures.
Very nice. I have so many questions. But I will first double click on your background. And here, Henkel is a very deep tech company. You have a background with PhD. I think you could probably say you're yourself a scientist. How much of that is needed for your position, but also how much of that is helping you in your position?
That's a good question. So I think in my particular position, you don't need to be necessarily a scientist, but you need to have a good technical understanding, because we are looking for startups in the area of material science and in the area of digital business models related to materials. So you need to have a good technical understanding. You need to understand what the startups are doing. I have people in my team who are still scientists, and they do the deep technical evaluation of those startup companies. But you need to have somehow a technical background, and I would say also a commercial experience helps a lot. So it's like new business development, right? It's really hybrid skills what you need, technical and commercial. You can argue what should be the academic background and what can be trained on the job. Could be maybe also the other way around. But in my case, I started with a technical education.
This makes sense. And so I can see how this is helpful for skills. But maybe there's also a bias that comes from it. You love technology. You're going to love the technology. You're going in your company. You even mentioned it was or still is tech push driven.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that these bias are mitigated when you look at startups?
Of course, as technical people or as a technical person, I sometimes fall in love with the technologies, because I really have to say that some startups are developing really super fascinating technologies, things which I didn't think are possible. So it's a great world, startups from a technical point of view. And we have basically two problems. One problem is to judge on the technology in an objective way. The other problem is to make a judgment if that technology will ever be commercialized in the future. So if somebody cares and somebody is willing to pay money for that technology, what helps is to look at that startup from many different angles. And these different angles come from very diverse team members. So I have 8 people in my team. The team is super diverse. So not only gender diverse, but also from a cultural aspect, diverse, different nationalities. From an educational aspect, so I have chemists in the team, I have an engineer in the team, I have business people in the team, I have even a psychologist in the team. So many different educations and also different professional backgrounds. So we have people who were looking back to a long-standing Henkel career. We have people who joined us fresh from the university, and we have people in the team who had a quite significant career outside of Henkel and then joined Henkel later. In this diverse team, these different people provide different aspects and angles on a particular startup. And with all these different opinions, we can come to a conclusion which we think is the most realistic conclusion we can get.
First, I have to say I'm very impressed of the diversity with 8 people. This is really impressive.
It's amazing. And I can tell you, from a maintenance perspective, it would be certainly much easier if I would have 8 Paulos in my team. But then the outcome would be very one-dimensional. I'm very proud about that team, and I can tell you everybody is hand-picked, because the art and the underlying problem is, of course, you can hire diverse people. But the real difficulty is not to hire diverse people. The real difficulty is to hire diverse people who can work in a team, who can act as a team. And that is not so easy. So this is why everybody in the team is really handpicked.
And maybe we should touch on your fund structure. Is it structured as a fund? Is it a commitment from the balance sheet? How do you plan reserve and follow investments?
We invest directly from the balance sheet. We simulate a fund, but that's simulation by our finance people. So we really invest directly from the balance sheet. And we have a certain frame in that simulation which we can use to invest. We didn't see a value to build a financial fund because the big question really is, how do we provide value to the company? And it's very clear that we don't provide value by financial gains from buying and selling startup shares. We are not a financial VC, absolutely not. Of course, when we do investments, we are always making sure that we make financially sound investments and that we are doing what makes sense also from a financial point of view. But the motivation to do a certain investment is a pure strategic motivation.
And would you say that because of that, when you do invest in startups, it's even a stronger signal? This is a partnership signal from Henkel Corporation to the startup.
Yes, absolutely. We could say we are here for the long run. And this is actually very true. So we have no pressure to sell our shares in a startup at the end of a fund or something like that. So we can really keep the shares of a startup until their technology is really developed and until they were able to commercialize that technology and were able to do a very good exit. I think nothing is worse, in particular in the area of material science, because there everything takes a little bit longer and is a little bit more expensive than when you do e-commerce platforms, for example. So in the world of material science, you really need that patience, and that is very important. And you also have to imagine that the startups are very often working with very significant large corporates as customers. And the message, Henkel does not support anymore the startup, they don't continue to invest into the startup, is a very bad message to the startup's customers and can very negatively impact the commercialization of that startup. So it's important that once you started working with a startup, once you invested in a startup, that you stay with them until they either bankrupt because it didn't work out well, it could happen as well, or they successfully did an exit. But there is nothing in between. It's really black and white.
Just to test your statement, does it mean that as long as they continue to sustain the strategic partnership, you will continue to keep your pro rata rounds after rounds?
Mostly, yes. It's always a case-to-case decision. The question is if that is needed. So we had, for example, a case where it was important for the startup to bring additional strategic investors on board because we see the additional value from this investor. In principle, yes.
Okay. I think you're managing to combine strategic intent with ecosystem commitment, which I think is really good for entrepreneurs.
It's absolutely needed. If you don't show that commitment, you're not serious.
Now, what happens if in a year or even in a quarter, you start to have 2-3 very good startups you want to invest? Do you have any special mechanism to handle more investment than you had budgeted from the balance sheet, or how does that work?
Yeah, there is a backdoor because it is a balance sheet investment and the balance sheet of Henkel is actually quite cash rich. We could then go to the board and say, here we have these very extraordinary investment opportunities. We understand it goes beyond the financial model which we have in place, but it would be very bad to miss these opportunities. And then they will decide in the board if they give us more leeway or not. But there is an escalation route in place.
Okay, so in a way you have a built-in flexibility when needed.
Yeah, this is why it's very important that our EVP, the head of the adhesive business, is our supporter, because he has to go to the board and make that call for us and so on. You always hear very often how important top management support is. I think we feel it very frequently, how important it really is. So I can only underline it is important. You cannot underestimate that.
Do you need to get also consensus before you decide to go to the investment board, or can you drive non-consensus investment?
We could drive investments without having a consensus in our team, but it would not be very wise, because if you have a team member running around always saying, I don't think it's a good investment. And then if something happens to that investment, this person would then always say, I said it from the beginning. So we never did that. We always had the consensus of the entire team, but we technically don't need it.
Very good. I want to also ask you questions because you were in corporate strategy before. How do you see the CVC and the corporate strategy team working together? And do you have any best practices here you could advise?
Yeah, so I think it's very important that they work very closely together, because in corporate strategy, you basically think about from a macroscopic level, what are the industry trends the company is exposed to, and what does that mean for the development of the business. But they normally think maximum 5 years ahead, normally 3 years ahead. And we are thinking much further ahead, but in different directions. And the truth is always in the middle. So I think the functions are sometimes grounding us a little bit and challenging us and making sure that we are not dreaming up something. On the other hand, we are inspiring them and making sure they also think in unconventional ways. They also think about topics and technologies and business models they might not have thought before. So I think it's providing values from both sides. And so these discussions are super interesting and super important to have.
Very nice. I want to shift gear. How about the strategic value to the mothership? And here it's always a touchy subject for CVCs because it's always abstract, but I have a feeling that actually you're making it quite scientific. So how do you quantify and visualize this strategic value?
Yeah, that is actually not fuzzy at all. Henkel is a company with clear KPIs in place, and the KPIs are financial KPIs. So as I said, our mission in life is to build new Henkel businesses based on the technology and business model of a startup company. And we measure the Henkel revenue based on a startup technology and startup business model. And that is also done by the colleague who is hand-holding the collaborations. So this is what we are doing. We are forecasting the commercial success of those collaborations, and then we are measuring what's the real actual outcome of it. And this is basically what it is. We also measure other soft things, how our funnel looks like, how big our deal flow is, and how many collaborations we have in place, and how many investments we did. But this is all interesting, but not more than interesting. What the company really cares about is what is the revenue we are generating by these startup collaborations for Henkel.
Yeah.
And this is
everything. Moving the needle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's fair.
Now, there's one more thing you did, which is a crash talk. Can you talk about this one?
Yeah, so I was always intrigued by the fuck-up nights. And when you work with startups and in the innovation area, you always say, fail fast and fail big. But that's not necessarily a culture in a corporate. Failing is sometimes not really an option. And I have to say that the failure tolerance in Henkel was not very high. So I thought we need to make sure people understand that there's always a chance in a failure. There is the chance to learn something from a failure. So I was intrigued by that concept of fuck-up night. We couldn't call it fuck-up night in our corporate environment. It's a global business. We are active in almost any country on this planet. So need to come up with a name which is most suitable for a large corporate. So we came up with Crash Talks. And so we are inviting top managers to talk about when they crashed in their career or a particular project, when a failure occurred, how they felt during that failure, normally very lonely and sad, and what are the 3 key things they learned from that and which others should learn from their failure. It's a 10-minute presentation. People like it because it's a super fast-paced thing. It's 1 hour. And so everybody can spare that 1 hour. The nice thing is you learn something, of course, but also you get to know our top managers much better. You learn an aspect and a side from their personality, which you normally don't get. So you would think, this guy never failed. This is why he is in this top position. No, he also failed, or she also failed. And regardless of that failure, they are now in that top position. So failing and learning from a failure is not career prohibitive.
I nearly feel like this initiative could be extremely powerful for changing mindset. You're talking about Henkel is not an organization that lacks failure. The top management, I wouldn't say confessing, but basically sharing some of their failure.
Yeah.
This goes a long way. So how frequently are you planning to do it?
So we do it once or twice a year. There are a lot of activities in Henkel, and we shouldn't overload the colleagues. And we also need the time to prepare these things. So we do it twice a year normally, and the people like it a lot. It's part of that cultural journey. It's part of making sure we are open-minded, we embrace open innovation, we embrace what other people did develop outside, and we also understand things sometimes don't work out. No problem. Stop early, but stop it if you see it's not working out, and repurpose and do something else which looks more promising.
So I just make the observation for the audience. Here, this is going beyond what a CVC do. It's not part of the day-to-day activity, but it's an opportunity for a CVC that is interacting with the innovation ecosystem to share that kind of mindset, but not directly. It's not Henkel Tech Ventures sharing this. It's enabling this sharing from the top management to the company. And I think I would probably end on this, which is you are taking advantage of the CVC function to go beyond just the operation of the CVC and to go into the how do you change and evolve the mindset of a company to be much more failure accepting and innovation welcoming.
Yeah.
Paolo, I want to thank you for your time. Many golden nuggets along the way, and I love your point about the cultural journey.
You're very welcome. It was really fun talking with you.
Thank you, Paolo, and I look forward to meeting you face to face very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.